Once again, good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. As always, I am Zach the Corruption Detector, and this is another edition of Red Pill News. We've got so much news to go over today, I'm going to have to do it in brief. First of all, we're going to be talking about a conversation between Sidney Powell and Maria Bartiromo. Not only are hundreds of thousands of votes most likely going to be invalidated, but Sidney believes that China had a backdoor into the Dominion voting system. We're going to hear about how and why that was able to be produced. Then we have a clip from POTUS talking about the exact same scenario that we just found, and Joe Biden promising to wait until someone has actually been certified before calling for the victory. Then we're going to be talking about the analysis of election night data, which shows that millions of votes for President Trump were switched over to Biden or were simply lost and discarded. Then we're going to be talking briefly about my interview with Melissa Carone last night. She is the Dominion Systems whistleblower who came forward with evidence of voter fraud. I need your help to get that story out. Then we have another witness from Detroit, Michigan, who says that the tabulation machines were illegally connected to the internet, which would allow hackers to get in. We've also got an Oregon director of elections who was fired after penning a scathing letter ripping the leadership in that state and the state computer infrastructure. Plus, we did an open records request on Georgia, and we found that there was nobody that worked on a broken water main that day. Remember, that's why voting was shut down. We've also got two men who found torn up Trump ballots in a closed polling place after a wedding reception. Twitter and Facebook and Washington Post are also trying to throw shade on the USPS whistleblower who says he was forced to backdate ballots. And we've got new information from the state of Georgia. The governor has announced a full hand audit and recount will be done there. And finally, John Brennan says he's concerned for what President Trump might do in his final days in office, should he not be certified. So please, everyone, sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a very brief word from our sponsor. No matter where it is that you live, most likely you're facing some real challenges right now. There's a lot of unrest and uncertainty, and in some spots it's not even safe to go to the corner store. And that makes getting food a problem. If things don't get better, are you going to have enough food to eat in the weeks and months ahead? Well, the fact is, many people won't. But those who act now and get at least a 4-week supply of emergency food shipped to them quickly will be the ones who survive. That's why I strongly recommend My Patriot Supply. It's the only source I personally use and trust for my own emergency food preparedness plan. You should do the same. They're the go-to experts in emergency preparedness, and their mission is your survival. Right now, you can save $100 on a full 4-week supply of their tasty meals that supply 2,000 calories a day. This will save your life if food disappears from the grocery store shelves again. And saving $100 is impossible to pass up. You can go right now to preparewithredpill78.com and get ready. Once again, that's preparewithredpill78.com. Do it today. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. First of all, today, considering this conversation with Maria and Sidney, I think we're going to listen to a couple of minutes of it. It's almost 6 minutes long, so I don't want it to take up the whole video. But we're going to hear the most important parts because Sidney Powell suggests that China had backdoor access to our election systems. Now, we know that the election systems at Dominion are partially owned by the families of Nancy Pelosi and the families of Dianne Feinstein. And we had that whistleblower from Dominion come forward last night, Melissa Carone, and she told us that one of the VPs of Dominion Voting Systems, the actual person who holds the patent for the technology behind Dominion, told her not to get involved, that it wasn't their job to run the election. Now, why would they not want to get involved if somebody was trying to steal the election? Well, if it was owned by Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein or members of their family, clearly they don't want Donald Trump to remain in power. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
Tell us where the Trump campaign lawsuits stand today, Sidney.
Well, there are suits filed in Michigan and Pennsylvania. They evidence significant irregularities in the voting process, fake ballots being brought in on pallets after voting closed, people testifying to having seen any sort of things from people writing Biden-Harris things on the side of a bus to ballots being laying on the sidewalk, to ballots being put in a trash can. always Trump ballots went in the trash can. And then we have statistical evidence that we haven't even brought out yet. That's my next venture, is to explain the statistical anomalies that show it was physically impossible for the election to have come out the way it did. It's just mathematically impossible. So for all people who love science, the math is dispositive. It's a little bit complicated to explain, but we have evidence of the same number of ballots being injected, or the same number of votes being injected into the Milwaukee and into the Wisconsin system and into the Michigan system 3 different times. I think there were 2 specific injections of exactly the same numbers in Michigan. And then in Milwaukee, it happened 3 times. And on top of that, we have multiple states who did not follow the law established by their legislature. We have 4 states that have deviated significantly from what the legislature told them to do in handling the ballots. Those all have to be thrown out. It's not a matter of curing them. They can't be considered at all. I would encourage every American patriot who saw an irregularity such as a thumb drive being inserted into a voting machine during the tally and the tally suddenly changing to massive pallets of ballots coming in the back door in the middle of the night, not properly handled at all, and just cranked out. I think there are hundreds of ballots that are even filled out in the same ink that were obviously manufactured. I mean, there is a ton of evidence that hundreds of thousands of ballots are going to have to be disregarded, and they're all for Biden.
Hundreds of thousands of ballots. All right, before you go, Sydney, I want to ask you about this software being used. Was it the Dominion software? Now, we talked on the show on Sunday, and we discussed the potential of Nancy Pelosi's family having an interest in that software company, Dominion. What can you tell us?
We are still investigating all of that and connecting the dots. There is a substantial problem with the Dominion systems because Texas even refused 3 different times to adopt and use those systems because they have inherent defects. One of our theories is that those defects were built in for a reason. There is Chinese software and other components within those systems. And of course, China has the greatest interest in the world in disrupting this election. I think it's entirely possible that the NSA and the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency that General Flynn used to head, should be conducting their own investigation for national security reasons, because I think there's a high likelihood that it's China, for the benefit of Joe Biden, that did this election rigging.
All right, so quite a few irregularities, and there are challenges going on in many different states, but it looks like hundreds of thousands of ballots are going to be disqualified, and we now get the information that there is Chinese software and Chinese parts inside these Dominion voting system machines. Now, she said that maybe the NSA should be doing an investigation. Well, don't forget, Donald Trump declared our federal elections as part of our critical infrastructure, which means that there would have necessarily been intervention on behalf of the intelligence community. That would mean surveillance of not only the machines themselves, perhaps monitoring of the machines locally, also remotely, also surveillance of the count rooms themselves, perhaps surveillance of the individuals manning these counts, perhaps the people overseeing these counts. And don't forget, we have this tweet from General Paul Nakasone from the day of the election. He is the director of the NSA. He said he wanted to thank for their continuing efforts on their enduring priority, which was safeguarding the elections. And along with CISA.gov, that was the new infrastructure group that was put together to monitor the elections specifically through the DHS and the FBI and all our government and industry partners, we continue to defend our nation's essential processes of democracy from foreign threats. Foreign threats like China? Yes, I believe that would be exactly what he's talking about. Now, even though we have all of this chaos going on right now, none of this has come into a court of law yet. That is still to come. But I would imagine there must be many pieces of evidence showing that there was not only foreign interference, but also domestic interference in our elections, and especially with those Dominion voting systems. Now, I want to show you a tweet from CodeMonkeyZ because he discovered something just insane. All right, so Ron says, check this out. AES 128 algorithm is okay if done right. Let's check if they did it right. AES 128 is an encryption algorithm. Well, taking a look at the information from Dominion Voting Systems, it says in their own books, all participants in the process use the same encryption key. What? All participants using the same encryption key? Do you guys know what that means? That means that if anyone has the encryption key to any of the Dominion voting systems, they have the encryption key to all of the Dominion voting systems. Now, back during one of the debates, POTUS had this question come up, asking him about a transfer of power in a free and fair election. Let's listen to what he and Joe had to say about that.
Will you pledge tonight that you will not declare victory until the election has been independently certified? President Trump, you go first.
I'm urging my supporters to go into the polls and watch very carefully, because that's what has to happen. I am urging them to do it. As you know, today there was a big problem. In Philadelphia, they went in to watch. They're called poll watchers, a very safe, very nice thing. They were thrown out. They weren't allowed to watch. You know why? Because bad things happen in Philadelphia, bad things. And I am urging my people. I hope it's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair election, I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that. And I'll tell you what,
does that mean,
from a common sense,
does that mean you're going to tell your people to take to the street?
It means you have a fraudulent election. You're sending out 80 million ballots. They're not equipped to. These people aren't equipped to handle it. Number one. Number two, They cheat. They cheat. Hey, they found ballots in a waste paper basket 3 days ago, and they all had the name military ballots. They were military. They all had the name Trump on them.
Vice President
you think
Biden,
that's good?
Vice President Biden, final question for you. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm while the vote is counted, and will you pledge not to declare victory until the election is independently certified?
Yes.
Bullshit. Because he already declared victory before the election was certified. Listen to President Trump. He has known from the very beginning exactly how this was going to go. Bad things did happen in Philly. They attempted to steal the election in Pennsylvania. You know what else happened? There were USB drives and voting machine infrastructure that were stolen in where? Philadelphia. You know where else those USB drives went missing? Was in Wisconsin. Now, they came up later, but how do we know it's the same USB drive, or that that USB drive didn't have the encryption keys on it already, or that the encryption keys that were stolen from Philadelphia didn't allow for someone in another state to use the unencrypted drives in the voting machines elsewhere? As Code Monkey just said, AES 128 encryption, the exact same keys were used on every single Dominion voting system. That means that anyone who had those keys would have unrestricted access to every Dominion voting system's encrypted drive in the country. And Code Monkey brings that up too. He says, after reviewing the Dominion voting system user manual, it seems the local IT guy who services the machines is theoretically the ultimate political gatekeeper. He has absolute power to decide elections. Now, I want to take you back one more time to that interview I did with Melissa Carone. Her boss, who would have been the local IT guy right there in Detroit, would have had the keys to the kingdom. And they didn't want to get involved in the election if things were going badly, and they were. Many instances of voter fraud were detailed by Melissa Carone in her affidavit, and it is quite obvious that massive voter fraud was happening not only in Detroit, not only in Michigan, elsewhere, not only in Wisconsin, not only in Philadelphia, but in many other states across the nation, virtually every single state that used the Dominion voting system. Now we're going to get into that detailed analysis where all of the votes were switched from Trump to Biden, or they were just erased completely. And remember, every single one of these instances happened on a Dominion voting system. Now, we had the glitch in Michigan, we had the glitch in Wisconsin, and after that was reported, someone on the Donald.win took publicly available information. Now, this is the exact same data that's used by Edison, as well as CBS, NBC, CNBC, all of the mainstream news coverage places. It was also reported by the New York Times. So here is a full list. In Pennsylvania, we had 220,000 votes switched from Trump to Biden and almost 1 million votes lost, 941,000. That right there is enough to make sure that President Trump wins this election. In New Jersey, we had 80,000 votes switched, 20 lost. Florida, 21,000 switched, 456 lost. Michigan, 20,000 switched, 21,000 lost. New York, 18,000 switched, 623,000 lost. Georgia, 17,000 switched, 33,000 lost. Ohio, 14,000, almost 15,000 switched, 5,000 lost. Virginia, 12,000 switched, 789,000 lost. And the list goes on and on. But you can see it is virtually every state in the nation. A total of 434,889 votes switched from President Trump to President Biden, with 2.7 million votes completely lost. This right here is proof, my friends, that Donald Trump won this election. And were it not for Dominion voting systems, with all of their glitches and software errors, then we would have results right now and President Trump would be certified. Now, we also have results in other states, Texas and Kansas. These are on different voting systems, but in Texas and Kansas, it is by a company that's owned by Dominion. And then in these states right here, these are using election systems and software. I don't know who owns them, but the exact same thing happened. The only place it didn't was in the District of Columbia, probably because mostly Democrats live in the District of Columbia, and they knew that there was going to be no need to go ahead and switch it. And then finally, we have a list of additional states. These are with unknown systems at play. And again, the overall total in these other states, 512,000 votes switched from President Trump to candidate Biden and 2.8 million votes lost. This, my friends, is a staggering find, and it shows that we cannot trust the results of this election in any state. This either needs to be a complete do-over or it's going to have to be decided by the Republican state legislatures. Now, in addition to Melissa coming forward with her affidavit, we have a number of witnesses in Michigan, but specifically, this witness right here states that the Detroit tabulation machines were illegally connected to the internet, which of course would allow for people to hack in and change the data. His name is Barry Doherty, and he came forward to describe the illegal internet activity of Detroit's voter tabulation machines. Now, the tabulation machines are what Melissa was talking about in the stacks of 50. They insert the ballots, they get scanned in, and then they get counted that way. And then they have to notate on those stacks who voted for who, how many votes for each person, and then they can go ahead and refer back to them if they have to do a hand recount. Now, the fact that these tabulation machines are connected to the internet would make it so that anybody watching would know exactly how many ballots would need to be brought in to offset the lead of one candidate or another, and in this case, it was always President Trump. Now, if you take a look at those graphs of the vote counts taking place, all of a sudden, Joe Biden does a spike up, and as Sidney Powell said, it looks like they really worked hard to maintain just a 1% lead all the way across, and every single time they brought these ballots in, it flipped it from President Trump to candidate Joe Biden. This is another staggering example of voter fraud that could very easily be done. Now, there is video of Barry's testimony. It is available in this article right here. If you guys want to watch the full testimony from Barry, the link to this article and all the others is in the description of this video below. Now, that Oregon elections director who was fired after penning the scathing letter, his name was Steve Trout. He was fired just this past Thursday because he had written a letter which sharply criticized the Secretary of State's office in Oregon for a lack of vision and leadership. He was tapped for a second stint managing the Oregon elections back in 2017, and it was claimed by Oregon that he gave notice he was going to be leaving, but Steve Trout actually said Monday he was fired via text message after raising concerns about the office and informing the Secretary of State that he was going to be seeking other work. So although he did let them know that he planned to leave, he got fired. They did not allow him to continue out the rest of his tenure. Now, in the memo that he sent out to the Secretary of State, he said that the office of the Secretary of State, which has been run by 4 people since 2015, suffered a lack of strategic vision and plans for the agency, and staff are not focused due to the lack of vision and leadership. Now, while he was there, he said some of our election systems are running on Windows Server 2008. End-of-life mainstream support from Microsoft ended back in January 13th of 2015, and all support ended on January 14th of 2020. And he also said our public-facing websites are single-threaded through one power supply on the Capitol Mall and one internet connection. There's no redundancy or resiliency or plan to provide either. He also said that their centralized voter system is a weak point in the state's election system, and it was reported that many county clerks told the Secretary of State that they had their own concerns after Trout got fired. So obviously a lot of problems in Oregon. There are many vulnerabilities running on software that is no longer supported. Who knows what happened in Oregon? As long as that is a Democrat-controlled state, I would imagine they are probably not going to look too deeply at the votes. All right, now remember on Election Day, Georgia suddenly closed the polls because they said that there was a water main that broke. Now, it looks that this did not happen because there was a records request done, and nobody can find anything stating that anyone came in to work on a broken water main. So what really happened? Well, on election night in Georgia, President Trump was running away with the state. And then suddenly it was reported that vote counting must be stopped in Fulton County due to the water main break in Atlanta. That was reported widely, with nearly 40,000 absentee ballots yet to be counted by the state. And according to officials, the water main break was at the State Farm Arena. There was a pipe that burst, and it was discovered around 6 a.m. Now, counting of the ballots began at 11 a.m. the next day. They don't have any records of anyone working on a broken water main, though, so that gives them about a 5-hour window to kind of get rid of enough ballots to give Joe Biden the victory, or to bring in enough ballots to offset President Trump's victory. So that calls into question any of the results that we have in Georgia. It really leaves it open to interpretation. Now, many people believe that President Trump actually won Georgia, and there has been enough hanky-panky there that it's been announced there is going to be a hand recount. And that was announced early this morning by the Georgia Secretary of State. Not only a full recount, but a full audit of every single legal vote. So that means any illegal votes are going to be cast out. If they appear to be votes that were fabricated for Joe Biden, they will not count. If they're votes for people who don't live in Georgia, they will not count. If they're people who don't have proper residency and haven't lived in Georgia long enough, they are not going to count. And if they're people who voted more than once, they are not going to count. Now, the Trump campaign has asked Georgia election officials to count all of the ballots using hands instead of using the high-speed scanners, because that's going to allow them to verify every single one. Also, to verify the signatures, which is something that they're supposed to do at the beginning. But we know that in Michigan, that didn't happen. Also in Philadelphia. This is going to be the first time that a full vote audit has ever been conducted in the state of Georgia. Now, from the state of Georgia, they say, with the margin being so close, it will require a full by-hand recount in each county. This will help build confidence. It will be an audit, a recount, and a recanvass all at once. It will be a heavy lift, but we will work with the counties to get this done in time for our state certification. And right now, Joe Biden only leads by 14,000 votes. So you can imagine how nervous the Biden campaign is right now, and especially after seeing in the story just a few moments ago about how many votes were switched from Biden to Trump and how many votes were lost. I think we're going to find that President Trump has a sizable lead in the state of Georgia. Well, the instances of voter fraud continue to roll in. Right here, this is a story where a wedding reception was taking place in what had been a closed polling place. They were taking the trash out, and inside that trash, they discovered a pile of torn up and destroyed ballots for President Trump. All of them had President Trump's name on it. One of them had Joe Biden's name on it, but it really does indicate that whoever was manning that polling place did not like President Trump. This was originally posted to an Instagram story. The young man who was at the wedding is a fan of President Trump, but he doesn't put this stuff out on social media generally. But it was originally published widely by Dinesh D'Souza. Another disturbing case of voter manipulation here in this country. All right, now, right after the election broke, we had a number of reports coming out from Project Veritas, where a U.S. Postal Service worker was directed by his superiors to backdate ballots to the date of the election so that they could be counted in the election. Well, since that time, it has been investigated by the U.S. Postal Service Office of the Inspector General, and I believe the FBI as well. And now Facebook, Twitter, and the Washington Washington Post are putting out fake news claiming that this Postal Service worker has recanted his election fraud allegations. This is not true. The gentleman in question right here, Richard Hopkins, is still a whistleblower. He has not recanted his claims. In fact, he wore a wire when the Office of the Inspector General came to speak with him, and it shows that they were attempting to get him to recant his allegations, and they were trying to manipulate him in the process. Now, the article has been written by Sean Boberg and Jacob Bogage, and the claims were quickly debunked by Richard Hopkins himself. That is him on the screen. Now, the article states that he recanted his information. It says that the Justice Department is investigating, but the claims themselves are completely fraudulent. Now, directly from the article, Hopkins Monday told investigators from the U.S. Postal Service's Office of the Inspector General that the allegations were not true, and he signed an affidavit recanting his claims. Now, this is according to officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe an ongoing investigation. It also says that Democrats on the House Oversight Committee tweeted late Tuesday that the whistleblower completely recanted. Well, this was news to Richard Hopkins. He forwarded a video of himself looking at the article and quickly correcting that fake news story. Now, despite the fact that the Washington Post is printing fake news, despite the fact that the source of the claims himself has not recanted, other media outlets like the Daily Beast and Complex, who are liberal rags, latched onto the story and started propagating it. Tech giants Facebook and Twitter also have not put any sort of fact-check warning or this may contain disputed information on any of the posts, as they often do for real news stories that simply they don't like. In fact, Twitter piles on more fake information, as you can see here. You know how the Twitter algorithm works. They propagate these fake news stories, and then they suggest a host of other fake news stories that back up the claims from that original fake news. And over again, a Pennsylvania postal worker has recanted. Breaking, postal worker admits fabricating allegations. I tell you guys, none of it is true. All of the claims of Richard Hopkins are very real. They are very factual, and he has not recanted his claims. Just look at this, all of this fake news. Now, there is clearly very little hope left for the liberal left-wing media, with perhaps the exceptions of the Washington Times and Washington Examiner. They might be posting corrections. And meanwhile, James O'Keefe is still posting factual information about the developing scandal. He is putting out the truth. People like myself are putting out the truth, and everyone else in the mainstream media, and that includes Fox News, continues to post fake news. All right, and finally, the town crier for the cabal, John Brennan, former director of the Clowns in America, is out on CNN voicing his concerns for what Trump might do in the next 70 days. And he's actually once again called for Trump to be removed forcefully from office. He went into panic mode after President Trump terminated Defense Secretary Mark Esper on Monday. He said, in 70 days, you can do a lot of damage in 70 days. He is still president of the United States, and he's going to carry out these vendettas against other individuals. I'm very concerned what he might do in his remaining 70 days in office. Like unseal all of those indictments, John Brennan? Like bring the crimes of you and your cronies to the forefront so that the American public can find out just how badly you screwed this country? He said, is he going to take some type of military action? Is he going to release some type of information that could, in fact, threaten our national security interests? Like maybe the JFK files to see how the clowns in America assassinated him? What can be done, Cuomo said. If Vice President Pence and the cabinet had an ounce of fortitude and spine and patriotism, I think they would seriously consider invoking the 25th Amendment and, pushing Donald Trump out because he is just very unpredictable now. Oh, that's right, John Brennan. He might actually do something that's good for this country instead of sitting on the information that you and your people have been hiding for decades from the American people. Now is the time, my friends, where we're going to find out what the mettle of Vice President Pence is made of. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? If he attempts to invoke the 25th Amendment, well, then we're going to have our answer. However, I'm going to stand by my original statement. I really do think that Mike Pence is a good man. If he isn't, it's going to be revealed, and we'll find out very, very soon. All right, guys, until we get a full and fair count of these votes, everything is going to be in play. This election is still in flux. If you've got people in your life that are telling you that it's over, that Joe Biden has won the election, you need to start showing them my reports, because this election is anything but over. And in the end, President Trump will be president again for another 4 years. And if you can't deal with that, then maybe it's time to start looking for someplace else to live. But I'm inviting you to be a part of our group of American patriots. We are all Americans. President Trump will represent you in the same way that he represents us. You have nothing to fear but fear itself. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am Zach, the corruption detector, and this was another edition of Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless. Hey guys, just one more thing before you go. I need to make a new outro because it's no longer relevant because I'm no longer on YouTube. I just want to remind everybody, go to the description of every single video. You can find links to support me, to support the channel. Also, you can find other links for places where I post my videos online, a variety of social media platforms. Clearly, you can follow me on Twitter, you can email me, you can get a hold of me in a whole bunch of different ways. But most of all, thank you so much for following me to these new platforms. We need to completely destroy and replace the current social media empire. These tech giants have too much power, and the best way we can do that is with our wallets and our signatures. Sign up at these other social media platforms, but most of all, my videos will be daily on CloutHub and Rumble. Talk to you guys again real soon.